Make some noise for Justin Teigen. Make some noise for all the men and women that has been lost in the system that has forgot about them.
What you have to go through in your process of healing is different because of all of everything that you have to carry after you lose your loved one at the hands of law enforcement. I met Leslie Redmond, the president of the NAACP for Minneapolis at that time. She introduced me to Jamar Clark's sister, Tiffany. And so, because Leslie knew my story, and of course everybody knew Jamar Clark's story. At that time, when me and Tiffany got together, we decided that there was not much support for people like ourselves, the families that lost their loved ones at the hands of law enforcement. Tiffany and Leslie and I, when we got together, we thought that it was imperative that we at least start. We didn't have money, but we wanted to at least start somewhere with providing support for people that were struggling and walking this walk that we've walked and that I've walked for 11 years now. I wanted to be that support that I did not have when my son's father, the protector to my home, my fiance, the other provider to my home, was stolen. A lot of these families are just left out here scrambling to pull their lives back together mentally, financially. I'm able to provide them with different resources. So if they're looking for housing, if they're looking for employment, if they're looking for transportation.
When Justin was killed, there was no Black Lives Matter. There was no movement because it was swept under the rug. And that's how it's been for the rest of our families. Charge it to my head and not my heart, but I stand here in representation of all of our families. Of all of our families, so support our families. Stand by our families, because during this time we are hurting. We are re-traumatized. We have to look at a trial that we only wish and pray that our families could get. And we have to watch this and know that our loved ones never got that day. We have to hear George Floyd's name screamed all over the world when we know that our loved ones died in garbages. When we know that Hardell Sherrill laid on a floor for days and they wouldn't give him the adequate medical care that he needed. But one thing that we will not do during this time, our families will not be quiet.
This does help me too, because I'm in a lot of pain deep down. I'm in a lot of pain. And it's almost like a pain I can't escape. Because they've done nothing, this state, they've done nothing to help. I've literally had families that said outside of my support group, they don't have any support. That is pretty much what motivates me to do what I do, is knowing that these people are hurting the same way that I am deep down inside. If Justin was to get justice right now today, I wouldn't feel like my work is done. I'm fighting for justice, and I don't plan to stop, because we have people that have not been held accountable, and this is what led up to George Floyd. As we all talk about, there has been over 470 murders at the hands of law enforcement here in the state of Minnesota alone in the last 20 years.
Justin Teigen did not die in vain. You are amplifying his voice. You're not only getting justice for him, but for all the families, and I can't say that about anyone else but you.
At Floyd's memorial service, when I was at my lowest, she picked me up.
Yes.
And she prayed over me, and she brought me from my knees, and we stood together.
I thank you for everything that you do and all the sacrifices that you have made. Because if it wasn't for you, it wouldn't be no this.
And it's just unfortunate that law enforcement, government officials, for whatever reason that they claim they stole our loved ones' lives, the fact of the matter is it's a life that is gone. So whatever reason that they can come up with in that moment, that life still meant something to so many people, you know, and that moment doesn't represent our loved ones. That moment that they murdered Justin, that he ran from the police because they beat him a week before that. That moment does not take away from who he was as a human being. It's 11 years later, and I'm still impacted by what they did to him. Why? Because I know he was a good person that didn't deserve to die like that.
She will never stop and fight, even if she's tired or if she's sick, but she's on time. I call her William Mandela.
So we stand in solidarity with the family of Justin Teigen, and we're gonna keep showing out as much as we can. Thank you guys for allowing me this space.
I never imagined having so much support, but the sad reality of it is the reason that I have all that support is because so many more people got murdered. That's what I give the floor to the families, to tell their stories, to tell their narrative, to tell the truth as they know it, because that was something that I wasn't allowed. The newspaper had put out all this other stuff about my son's father, and I knew the true story because I walked into the mortuary and seen his skull cracked in half and dog bites all over his body, his wrist detached from his arms, his eyeballs punched in, his head the size of a basketball. His head was this big when I walked into the mortuary. My son could not even recognize his father in the casket. And that is why Family Supporting Families Against Police Violence provides a place where these families can safely tell their stories. If people would have known through the media outlets what was really going on, or what was at least the other side of the story, besides what the police told. If people would have known of that, George Floyd might be alive today, and many other people prior to George Floyd. We need our narrative told too. Or matter of fact, we don't have a narrative. We have the truth that we know. They have a narrative. They gotta come up and put their story together. We got it already. We're living it. I live what they did to my son's father. I live that beating when I walked in that mortuary. We are just human beings. We are families. That's it. We're not this angry mob. We're hurting families.
Father God, as I stand in solidarity with Toshira, the Teigen family, all stolen lives families, and of course the George Floyd family, I ask you, Father God, to touch their hearts right now and embrace them and let them know that you are near, that you are here, and all they have to do is call